Compliance with a congressional subpoena is not a suggestion. In the American legal system, it is a mandatory requirement. This rule applied directly to Steve Bannon, a senior strategist and a central figure within the first Trump administration. Bannon was already familiar with the federal justice system, having previously pleaded guilty to fraud charges in the We Build the Wall nonprofit case. But his most prominent legal battle began in 2021, when he ignored a subpoena from the committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol. The government responded by charging him with contempt of Congress. After losing his initial appeals, Bannon served a 4-month sentence in a federal prison, which concluded in late 2024. At that point, the sentence was served, the record was set, and the case functionally closed. Everything changed in April 2026, when the Supreme Court suddenly intervened in a legal matter that most observers believed was already finished. The court vacated the prior conviction and sent the case back to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. This raises a difficult legal question. How can the highest court in the land dismantle a conviction after the prison time has already been served? The answer relies on a specific argument over the semantic definition of one word. This text represents the actual law for contempt of Congress, which dictates the standards the government must meet to prove guilt. To secure a conviction, the prosecution must prove the defendant acted willfully when defying the subpoena. In most criminal trials, willful behavior means acting with malicious intent. Bannon's defense, however, argued he wasn't advice. His legal team maintained that because he was told his testimony was protected, his refusal to appear was an attempt to follow legal guidance, not a willful crime.
This strategy moved the fight away from his physical actions and forced the courts to debate Bannon's state of mind. The core of that legal advice rested on the concept of executive privilege, which shields certain presidential communications from public disclosure. Bannon argued that his conversations with President Trump regarding the January 6th timeline were strictly confidential and off-limits to Congress. When he first brought this argument to the Supreme Court in 2024 to avoid prison, the justices declined to hear the case. But by 2026, the court accepted the logic of the willful defense, ruling that his reliance on executive privilege deserved a second look in the lower courts. By tying his defiance to a lawyer's interpretation of presidential power, Bannon created a pathway to erase the legal consequences of ignoring the subpoena. When the Supreme Court vacated the conviction and remanded it to the D.C. Circuit, it effectively reset the legal clock. This decision nullifies the original conviction, returning the case to an active, pending status, as if the trial had never happened. Because the case is once again pending in court, the executive branch regains control over its prosecution. This provides the Department of Justice, now directed by the second Trump administration, the authority to step in and formally dismiss the charges before a new trial can begin. It shows that in the highest levels of the law, a prison sentence isn't always the final word. With enough time and a specific enough semantic argument, even a finalized conviction can be wiped from the record.